All right, folks, we're going to get into the session today. We're going to start with a really basic session where we're going to go through the sections of a CloudFormation template. We won't cover everything in these templates today, but we're going to go through kind of the main ones. So you can see I've got the CloudFormation documentation page open here. Let me get rid of the sidebar. And we've got all of the sections that make up a typical template. You can see if we scroll down here, the majority of these, I think pretty much everything except the resource section is required. Today, I'm going to go through the ones that we would typically use in templates that we build for our customers or that we're using internally on our own projects. And what we've got set up, let me see here, is drag this over here, is I'm in our demo account and I have a VPC up and running, ready for us to use. Okay. So there's our demo VPC. And it's a pretty standard VPC. I'll show you how I've got it set up. Just, yeah, I don't know if the filters aren't really working very well anymore here. GUI update, I guess. So we've got, four subnets within a VPC, and we've done the typical 2 public, 2 private, spread them across multiple availability zones. And you can see there's obviously nothing in any of these except a couple NAC gateways that are running in the public subnets. So this will give us the basis of everything that we want to do. So we've got route tables defined, right? We're not using the default or the main route table. We've set up individual route tables for one for each of the subnets. And if we have a look, again, nothing fancy here. If we deploy something in a private route table, it can obviously talk to everything in the local VPC. If it's trying to talk to anything else, it's going out through the NAC gateway. If we deploy something in the public subnet, right, we still have that standard local route. And then we've got, in this case, the catch-all route, the any route goes to the internet gateway that we have deployed here. So a standard template, we deployed this out of our template repository. So everything is ready to go. What I thought we would do today as a way to walk through these template sections is just build a really simple EC2 instance and deploy that in one of the subnets. It really doesn't matter what subnet we're putting it in or which subnet we're putting it in, because we're not going to actually do anything with it. It's more just to demonstrate these different sections within the template. All right, so let's dive in. The first thing we are going to define is a format version, and you can see here that it's pretty much the same every time. It is optional, but we put it in, and you can see up here it's identifies the capabilities of the template. The latest version is this, and it's the only valid option that we have. But just in case, we're going to put this into our template. So let me go over to the editor, and I've got my project built here, and we're just going to call this EC2 YAML. Okay. And we'll start with our template version. Okay. So there we go. You can also, if we go back and have a look, we can set a description. Again, an optional value, but we'll do that just for later on if we want to come back and try to figure out what the heck it was that we were doing here. So we can give it a little bit of information. So deploys simple right, nothing too fancy there. We aren't going to use metadata in this example, but metadata allows us to provide additional information about the template. But I think more important for this is really the couple calls that we can make down here. We are going to create a bunch of parameters, so inputs into the template. And what we've got here is the ability to essentially modify the interface, determine the order, the grouping of the parameters that we are going to require in order for this template to be deployed. And you can see that if we don't include something like this, CloudFormation just takes the parameters and sorts them alphabetically. If I go back into CloudFormation here, just to show you an example of this, and we have a look at the demo VPC, and we go over to the template. Oh, we don't have one here either. I thought we had that defined here. Sorry. So metadata allows us to essentially add additional information about the template itself, but also organize the interface for us. This is normally what we use it for, but you can also see that we can run some information here around the CF init script. So one of the helper scripts that's available to us in CloudFormation. And we would also see a designer section here that if we are using the CloudFormation designer, it allows us to determine what that looks like. Okay. The designer normally does that for you because you're in the designer working and dragging and dropping components. So, depending again on how you're building these environments. Okay, so that's metadata. We are going to start with parameters. And parameters are essentially how we are going to pass information into this template. Okay, basically inputs. So let's have a look at those. So we'll define the parameters section. And I usually like to split our templates up. So I would have something like template parameters, and then we always create a series of tags. So in this case, I'm going to say tag parameters, and we'll start with our tag parameters, and we use a standard set. Why am I getting all these underlines here? What's this telling me? Oh, okay. So it's just telling me I don't have a resource section because that's the required component. So hopefully this will go away at some point. We're going to define a few different parameters. Okay, type string. And our default value is going to be, we're going to call this just development. And then we use something called allowed values. This is an optional property that you can set on the parameters. And this allows us to control what is put into this field. Okay, so we'll just do our standard development, production, and proof of concept. The other thing that we always like to do is set up something like to tell us who owns this. So it'll look very similar. All right, so we're just going to say Curious Orbit owns this, and then how do we contact the owner? We'll just use our catch-all email address. Okay. We're going to come back and add some additional template parameters up here. Essentially, when I think of template parameters, I'm thinking about the parameters that we're going to use to deploy the resources themselves. That's essentially what we're going to do. So I'm going to leave it blank for now. And the way that I tend to build this is as I'm writing these out, I kind of move from the resources. Actually, I start in the CloudFormation documentation because there's just too many attributes to remember. So I look through that, what's required, what additional components or additional attributes do we want to define, and I move between that document and this template, and then I just fill in my parameters as I go. So we'll leave parameters as is right now. Okay. And then if we look back here, we've got a couple other important components that can make up a template. Again, both optional. I'm going to actually skip over mappings for a second, and we're going to look at conditions. Conditions are essentially if statements. And what they allow us to do is create logic within our templates, right, that says, or that allows us to create a template that we could use across multiple environments. Ultimately, what we're trying to do in our templates is we want to make a template as flexible as possible. You don't want a template for production, a template for development, a template for your proof of concept environments, templates for different regions, things like that. So using things like conditions and maps allow us to create a single template, but introduce flexibility into that template so that we can, use this template in different spots. So you can see a couple examples here, right down here. Create our production resources if the environment type is production. We're actually going to use exactly this because it's an easy way to demonstrate how to use a condition in a template. Okay, so we're just going to kind of mimic that. Conditions. I always like to, I don't know why we started doing this, but I always like to say is. So a lot of times we'll also have something like this, is encrypted. Because right? In my brain, I often think of these as questions, right, that we're going to ask somebody to fill out. So I don't know why we started doing that, but we always structure them this way. And then we're going to use an intrinsic function. If you're not familiar with intrinsic functions, these are essentially built-in functions, again, that make creating our CloudFormation templates easier. That's all they do. And I'm going to steal the structure from here. Basically, we're going to use another intrinsic function. We're going to refer to the environment variable and say, if the environment variable is set as production, then this condition is production is set to true. So that's the first thing we want to look at. The next section, whoops, mappings. The next section is another example of some of the built-in functionality in the templates to make these templates super flexible. So I mentioned, as we were talking about conditions, this idea of using the same template across different environments: production, development, proof of concept. Okay, mappings allow us to use these templates across different AWS regions. So remember, a lot of these services would be regionally specific. What we're going to look at today is if you're deploying this in CA Central 1, I want you to use this Amazon Machine Image AMI. If you deploy this template in, let's say, US East 1, then you're going to use a different AMI. Today, we're just going to point those at the default AMIs for Linux. We're going to use the AWS Linux version 2. But in an environment, if we're building this out, either for a project that we're working on or for one of our customers, we would typically, the foundation of what we're building here would be based on a series of custom AMIs that either the customer has created or we've created on their behalf. This, you can do a lot more than what we're going to do here today with mappings. You can put all sorts of information in here. I've seen some really advanced templates. It's a great way to look a value up and then grab the key value pairs associated with that value. But we're going to keep it simple. And I got myself a little cheat sheet because I always forget the structure of this. Actually, let's go back and have a look at the map here and see if we can get this going. So here we go, right? We've got the mapping section. We give it a logical name. Then we have our key value pairs. Okay. So let's see if we can do this. And then I'm going to check my cheat sheet. So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to call it EC2 map, because essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to map AMIs to different regions so that we can run this template across various regions without having to modify the template. Okay, so let me go back here. So we've got our mapping section. There's our logical name. Now we've got essentially the keys and the values. So what we're going to do is we're going to say in CA Central 1, if you're deploying this in production, I'm going to put a placeholder in here. This is the AMI that I want you to do. Actually, I should make sure that I'm using the same names, right? And if you're deploying it in development, that's what I want. And then for now, we're just going to cover the two regions where we normally operate for our customers, right? In US East 1 and CA Central 1. And we'll come back and fill those in a bit. Okay. So if we look at this, we've got our format version, optional. We put a description, also optional. We skipped over metadata, but just remember with metadata, it allows you to modify the console, organize the parameters that you're requiring for the template to be deployed, or the stack to be deployed, I guess, based on the template. We've got our parameters, so basically our input values, and we just started with a few simple ones, our standard set of parameters. The environment, who owns it, and how do we contact that owner. And now we've got both mappings and conditions. So if we just go back up to the template anatomy here, okay, we've made it kind of 3/4 of the way through already. It's relatively simple up to this point. Let's have a look at a couple other things. So transform. Transform is an optional section. You can see here that we would use this for serverless applications like Lambda-based functions. And you can see that we're able to use the transform section to refer to the specific version of the SAM solution that we want to use. We're not going to use that today, so we can skip over to the meat of really this. Any template is the resources section. All right. What we're going to do in this is we're just going to demonstrate how you can use conditions in different ways. So the first is, let's say instance 0, and we need a type definition. So we know this is going to be AWS EC2 instance. Okay. And we're going to use our condition here. And we're going to say deploy this only if production is true. Okay? That's all we need to do. And then we define our properties. Actually, I'm going to do this just to demonstrate this now. Let's say we're in a situation where we want to do something like this. Oops, what did I do differently here? So what's the difference between instance 0 and instance 1? We've got this condition set on the entire resource, which means instance 0 is only deployed if our condition is production. Okay? This instance is deployed regardless of the environment type that we've set earlier on. Okay? What I'm going to show you is once we get into this definition is how we can use conditions on the attributes you're defining as well. Okay, so let's start with our production instance here. Okay, and we're going to define, we're going to find our properties. Now, at this point, the way that I write templates is I immediately go back here and I can start going through all of this to determine what I need. Okay. What attributes do I have to assign? And I'm really looking for a couple things. First off, I'm looking for, is this attribute required? Okay. Yes or no. That's easy. And then I'm also looking at this section, update requires. And this is really important. So we deploy this template. We essentially create a stack in CloudFormation. The template describes the resources that we want to deploy. The analogy that I like to use in this is kind of like a recipe. You want to bake a chocolate cake. You have a recipe, right? And the recipe consists of two components. It consists of a list of ingredients, right? What do we need to make this chocolate cake? And then the instructions to assemble those ingredients into the final product, a chocolate cake. So the templates in my mind are kind of exactly the same thing. What we're doing is we are defining the ingredients, right? The attributes to assemble a resource, in this case, an EC2 instance. So we're going to go through, we're going to look at all of these things. And as I was mentioning, the update requires, we've taken this recipe and we've constructed it and we've deployed these EC2 instances. And then you need to run an update later on. You basically run a stack update. Depending on the attributes that you've defined and what you want to change within that property definition, the update can have different effects. So you can see here, update requires some interruptions. If we quickly scroll through this, here's a good example. The update requires replacement. So that means if we've defined this optional attribute, and then we go and we change the availability zone later on, when we run the stack update, that will replace that EC2 instance. And this is really important because obviously you might not want that EC2 instance to go away, right? It might need to be there for another purpose. So we always look at required, yes or no, and then what happens in the update. We're going to keep this really simple this afternoon, and we're just going to look through for what's required. Okay, so we'll scroll through this list, look for our first required component. There's really not a whole lot that's actually required. Here we go. This is actually saying it's conditional. Okay, and they're saying it's conditional because you can specify the image ID in one of two places. You can specify it in this resource definition, or we could use a launch template. In our case, we're just creating EC2 instances, so we're going to specify the image ID in the template. So that's our first required component, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to set it as a to-do. I'm just basically creating myself a bunch of placeholders here. Required. We also need our instance type. Again, it says required no, but I think that's, I don't know why you would, I guess maybe if there's a default value. I don't know. We always set the instance type. Okay, so let's do the same thing. Not required, not required. Our key pair name, that is, we're going to skip over this today. If we were doing this for real, you can see that the importance of having this. If you don't specify a key, then you're not able to connect to that unless the machine image you're using already has some other way to allow users to log in. We're not going to use these instances. We're essentially just going to run the template to make sure it works, and then we're going to rip it down. So to keep it really simple today, we're going to skip over this. But if we were building it in real life, then yeah, we would define our key names here, basically associate it to a key pair. All right, the next thing is a launch template mentioned before. This is essentially a way that you can create a template that has most of the common things that you need and then refer to the template in the definition rather than having to define them for all your EC2 instances. We're not going to worry about that today. Monitoring, network interfaces, placement groups. None of this is required. Security group IDs. The IDs of the security groups, you can create a security group. If you specify a network interface, you must specify a security group. And we're going to have a network interface. So yeah, let's create one. So we're going to call this security group 0. And actually, I'm going to do it like this for now. We'll just leave the whole thing to do. I'll have to look those up. So we know that we need security group IDs, and we know that this is a list. So what we're going to do is we're going to go like this. Ref, so we're going to use an intrinsic function again. So refer to this. And another thing to keep in mind when you're creating these templates is by default, CloudFormation is going to try to create as many of these resources in parallel as it can. So now that I basically require this security group to be available before deploying this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set another type of attribute here, depends on, and we're going to say this depends on, security group 0. Okay, so we can copy these two components up here and here, all right? Okay, we're not using EC2 or the default VPC, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't need our source destination check, no SSM. Subnet ID we're going to need. So essentially, where are we going to deploy this? And then tags. And this is where we're going to go back to what we set up earlier on. Environment. The value is, you can see you're going to use a ton of references throughout your templates. So we're going to refer back to those parameters that we created earlier on, right? The 3 that we use everywhere. Perfect. So now we've got these additional components that we need to set up. Actually, let me make sure I'm copying these, right? There we go. So image ID. So this is our Amazon machine image that we want to use. What we're going to do here is we're going to refer back to our map. Okay, let's actually call this region map instead. And now what I need is a couple AMIs. So we're going to go back to our console, and we're going to go to the EC2 service. And I'm in the central region here already, and I'm just going to say launch. And I'm not going to go any further than this. I really just want that ID. Normally, we would have this for like referring to a custom AMI. But in this case, we'll use the default ones, and I'm going to make them the same production development. But this will just illustrate the point that you can set these up on a number of values. And then I'm going to switch here to US East 1 because AMIs are regional. So I'm going to grab the identifier for the same Linux 2 in the US East 1 region. So there we go. Okay, so we've cleaned those first to-dos. Now what we need to do is we need to find a way to refer to this. And I've got a cheat sheet for this. We're going to use another intrinsic function called findInMap. Okay. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so here's our function that we need. And I'm going to use the short syntax here. Okay, so we'll just cut and paste this. Okay, so our map name in this case is EC2 region name. The top level key is the region. So we don't want to hard code this. What we want is to use what's called a pseudo parameter. And a pseudo parameter allows us, when we run this template, it will pull in information for us. So we're going to go like this. We're going to say sub Whenever you see something like this and it's prefixed with AWS, you know you're looking at a pseudo parameter. And then we want to do the same thing here. We want to refer to the environment variable or the environment parameter that we created before. And so we've got this all dynamically set up. I'm going to make an assumption that I have this right, and we need to copy it down here as well. Okay. So we're going to use the same, we're going to use the image IDs based on the region where we're deploying this. Now, the next thing is our instance type. And this is where we're going to look at our first evaluation of this condition. So what I want to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to set some template parameters. So I'm just going to say instance type is a string. Okay. Its default value is, let's say, a T3. I don't know. We'll just make it a small. And then we allow, just like we did on the other, T3 smalls and T3, I think it's a micro, right? So those are the two instance types that we can use. If we make no changes, it's going to use the default, which is a T3 small. Otherwise, we could have a drop down here. Okay? And we're going to use our condition to determine this. So what I'm going to say is if is production, all right, then we're going to use ref instance type. Otherwise, we're going to hard code this to T3. Did I say micro was in that list? Yeah, T3 micro. So what we have here is an if statement. Look at the value of production, is production, right? The setting of the condition here, is this true or false? If it's true, use this instance type, refer back to whatever the person provided. If it's false, we always want to use a T3 micro. Let's grab that. And we'll do the same thing down here. Now this is yelling at me that it's wrong. Find in map requires 3 arguments. What have I done wrong? Okay, well, let's come back to that. I've got my cheat sheet. And I grabbed find in map here. And it's ref. Oh, see what I've done? Yeah, I don't need the sub here. I should use ref. And we want to just do this. Okay. And we'll do the same thing. We'll grab that and dump it here. Okay. And then we want, that's basically all I needed in my cheat sheet. And we've got our if statement here, which isn't yelling at us, so that's pretty good. And then we want to look at how do we get this subnet. We're going to use another function here to do this, and we're going to look at basically we're going to grab a list of the availability zones that are usable for us in the region that we're at, and we're just going to place this in the first of those. Now, do I have a cheat for that? I do not. All right. So we're going to test my memory here. Let's have a look at the documentation. This is what I want. I want to use get AZs. I'm hoping they have an example for us here, because I can never remember this one off the top of my head either. So yeah, see right here, select. So we're actually using a couple different intrinsic functions together. So we're using the select intrinsic function, which refers then to the first entry in an array that comes back from get AZ. Okay, so let's see if we can do this in a single line. Select. Okay, what's the structure of this look like up here? Let's go find select. So the index and then list of objects. So this is essentially what we want right here. So we want to use the first entry, and then we needed get AZs, and we have another short for this. So we're just going to say get AZs, and I want, you can use the pseudo parameter to specify the region. Specifying empty string is the same. So what we're going to say is just that. Okay. So you can do what we did before, where we do something like this, but the short form for that is just an empty string. That looks too short, but we're going to try it. Okay. So now we've got all of the to-dos filled for our 2 instances. We've got, in this case, we're setting a condition here to say only deploy this if it's production. And in this case, we're saying, hey, deploy this in all environments, but modify its instance type. So we've got that idea of setting a condition on the entire logical resource, instance 0. And then we've got an example of using a condition on a specific attribute within a resource. Okay? The thing that we're missing now is we need to build out our security group. Otherwise, this is going to fail. So let's go back up here. And we'll go over to back to the documentation, and we'll find security group. All right. So again, pretty basic. We'll do the same thing that we did before. AWS EC2 security group properties, and then let's have a look at what's required. So group description is required. And we'll just call this a demo security group. Group name is not required. And this is where we're going to define the egress and ingress rules. So remember that in a security group, it allows all outbound traffic by default and denies all inbound traffic. We're going to keep it simple and just use the security group ingress. We're going to let it send all traffic out. And now we need to understand what this is. So it's a list of ingress rules. And now you can see what's required here. We're going to just say, again, because we're just doing this for a demo, I'll set it to, actually, let's be a little better here. Let's do this. Corporate subnet. Okay. And then we can go back up here and say, and I'm just going to hard code this because it's easy for now. But you might have something else you want to do here. You could even use a prefix list for this if you wanted, okay, to make it a little more advanced. But that satisfies the CIDR ranges. Do we need a description? We don't, but let's put one in. Okay. So we're going to say allow inbound SSH traffic. Okay. And now we need our from ports, our to ports, our protocols. You can see all of this. A lot of this is, we don't need a from port. We don't need a to port, but we're going to lock this down. So we're going to say from port 22 to port 22. We're going to only allow SSH traffic. The protocol, I think it's just TCP. Okay. There's how you could refer to a prefix list. We're not going to use that. You can also chain your security groups together. In this case, we're using a CIDR notation, so we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about the name, the owner ID. We already got to port. Does this support tags? They're not showing it here. Oh, sorry, that's security group, not the ingress. So yeah, here we go. Okay. So we're going to say tags, and we're going to copy what we did earlier, because we're going to use the same set of tags. I always like to leave the tags at the end. The other thing that we need is our VPC ID. So I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet for this and explain to you what we're going to do here. Maybe. Let's try that again. I'm going to grab this. So what is this? We've got another intrinsic function called import value. I'll show you what we did in our VPC template, but we have the output section in our VPC template. And a feature of outputs is we can now create exports. So exports then can become imports into another stack. So we're going to refer here. I'm going to change that VPC stack. Okay, so we'll go up here and we'll say VPC stack, type is a string. And we are going to set this to a default. And I think I just called it demo VPC. We'll verify that in a second. And then we need whatever we called the VPC ID. Okay, so let's go have a look at that. Go back to the console, go here, and we got to go back to Canada. and we want to go to the VPC service. Or actually, no, sorry, we want to go to the CloudFormation service. So we can verify our stack name first, demo VPC, and then we can just go here into the outputs. And we need the VPC ID, which is this output value here. So you can see this is the name and this is the key. So we want to just say demo VPC. So I think all we need in this case is just the stack name, because that stack name matches the ID. Okay. So now we've got our security group definition, really simple security group. We've got our instances, our 2 instances. The last thing that we don't need to create, it's optional, but a lot of times we end up chaining our stacks together. So outputs of one stack become inputs for the other. So we've got instance 0. And remember that instance 0 is only going to be created if we have a production deployment. And we're going to say the value of this is just ref instance 0. And we'll demonstrate the export here. We'll say export name. We'll use another intrinsic function and a pseudo parameter to define this dynamically. So whatever we call this, and we'll just say instance 0. And then we're going to do the same thing for instance 1, but in this case we can remove the condition because that's going to be deployed no matter what. All right, so if you've ever watched any of these before, you probably are already smiling, because the likelihood of me doing this right in one shot is as close to 0 as possible. I'm really bad for typing all these names, but also you'll notice here that I've changed my extension. Usually I just use YAML for my extensions, and I've used YAML here because I've got the CloudFormation toolkit installed in PyCharm, and it was kind of auto-completing some of these, so hopefully that will increase the likelihood of me doing this correctly. So I think we've got everything. Okay, let's see what happens. We're going to go here, and we're going to create a new stack, and we're going to say upload a template. And I want to go demos, and we're going to upload this template. So here's the first opportunity for us to identify any errors. So I didn't get the red bar across the top, so that's good. Okay. And I'm just going to call this EC2 demo, and then you can see all the parameters that we've set already. And I'm going to make this, I'm going to leave this as development, because then it'll test that condition, because we have that one EC2 instance that says deploy this instance only if we're in production. Okay, so let's give this a shot and see what happens. And I've got my VPC stack here. Remember that we didn't put metadata in, so regardless of the order that I put the parameters in my template, the actual console here will just organize these alphabetically. Okay. Let's go next. Normally we would tag this. We normally deploy all these templates through GitLab, so we'll have like a GitLab CI script that does this work for us. So we would do the same thing, like we would do something like this. All right, we'd go in here and set this up. And then what was the other one? Environment. And we just make that development. Okay. Don't need any permissions. You know, stack policies allow us to control what happens to the resources in this template for future updates through CloudFormation. We'll leave that blank for today. No, not defining any policy. How do we want it to roll back? Any notifications, stack creation, all these are additional options. We're going to just leave everything in the default. We get our summary slide, and we're going to say create. And there we go. Unresolved instance 0. What have I done wrong here? Hold on, let's go back here. So there's our example. You can see how they've got the condition set on the entire option. Condition. Create prod resources. That refers back. The volume condition value. Yeah, that one's interesting. Did I just typo it or something? Okay, so let's just try this. I'm going to go like this. We'll just comment that out because it should err up here too on this condition. I would have thought. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. Okay, let's try this and see what it does. Go back to our console. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to go previous, instead of canceling it. We'll go back here. We'll re-upload the template. Maybe. And try this again. Everything should be still set the same. So there's our environment tag. Let's see if it throws the same error at us again. It does. Instance 0 in the output block. Maybe it didn't like the way I updated that. Let's try it again. Create. We left all that as the defaults. You got the idea, tags. I'm going to skip through that this time. And let's see what it does. Create stack. Instance 0 in the output block. Okay, so let's do this. Let's completely remove it and see what it does. Oh, I see what I did. Look, remember I was saying about typos? Instance 0 here. So it's actually not complaining about this. It's complaining about that. All right, so let's try it again. I think that's what the problem is. Because in that case, we're referring there, the output value would be set to something that, oh, there we go. Thanks, man. Didn't notice it in the chat window. You caught it faster than I did. Demo EC2, all the same. There we go. So now what we should see, remember what I was saying about typos? Security group. So delete this. So we're in security group 0, and I don't know how to spell protocol. So let's go back and have a look. Protocol. What did I do wrong there? So inside ingress. Oh, IP protocol. IP protocol. All right. So that's gone. Go through this again. Demo EC2. All right, no failure on our EC2, or sorry, our security group this time, so that's good. Let's see if it complains about anything in those EC2s. There we go. Subnet CA. Subnet ID. Central CA does not exist. Invalid subnet ID. I think I'm missing something in here. I want to say that I missed where to place this. Find instance again. No. All right, when all else fails, let's look at one of our old demo projects here. See if we can steal something. Oh, that's just a static website. Don't know if we've made it far enough there. Don't think we have anything that I can steal off of. So what have we done wrong here? Subnet. I wonder if we go and we look. Let's delete that. Actually, let me leave that so I can come back and look at that. Let's go open up the VPC again. And just see where we actually deployed these subnets. So I'm in 1A and 1B. Yeah, I didn't feel very confident about this in the first place. There's something wrong in here. So let's go like this. Yeah, I think they do. I'm sure we've done that before. These are all VPCs. So hang on one second. I'm just going to stop my screen share. I have to look something up that I can't necessarily share. I'll be right back. Actually, let's just go like that. There we go. All right, so let me just let me find another project that we've got this in, and I can grab a reference to it. Yeah. Okay, let's do it this way then. Okay. So we're going to use the same thing we used in, rather than setting it like this, we're going to, I think there might be something odd going on with the fact that we're not referring to the existing VPC. So what I've done instead is I'm using the import value VPC stack on the private subnet for both of these. So let's try that instead. But before we do that, let's just make sure I can delete this now. Go back here and just look at the outputs. And we do have a private subnet 0. So this is what we'll construct. So let's try that. And we'll go here. All that can stay the same. We won't worry about any of this, and we'll create the stack. All right, so we made it this far last time. Okay, it didn't air out immediately, so I'm feeling a little better this time around. Let's go over to EC2. So you can see we've got an instance coming to life here, right? There it is, T3 micro, okay, which matches up with the deployment that we had, because if we go back to our template here, we set this to development. Therefore, we did not deploy instance 0. We only deployed instance 1, and we wanted to say that if you're in something other than production, use a T3 micro. So this looks like it's doing what we want it to do. There we go. So we've got an EC2 instance running now. We didn't name it. We could put that in as a key value pair there in the tags, but we've got our T3 micro running here, the sizes that we want. Now we've got a few minutes left here. Why don't we go, and I'm going to do this, create a new stack. We'll use the same template now, and we're going to call this demo EC2 production. From your calendar, and then we're going to make it production. So this should overload or override some of the settings. We'll leave all this the same, and then run the next stack. TCI starts in 10 minutes. You just heard my, I don't know if you picked that up in the chat or not, but my echo was reminding me I have to be somewhere. So now you can see both instances are coming to life. And if we flip quickly back over here, now we've got multiple instances running. If we look at the tags, this one's production, this one's production, and you can see that we've got T3 smalls here as well versus the original one that we deployed. So this is a good example of how you can use conditions in your CloudFormation templates We have a single CloudFormation template that we're now able to run across multiple environments. And because we're using mappings, I can't do it today, but we could take this same template and run it in US East 1 because we created, if you remember back here, we created this map here. And we just basically said, running these in different environments as well as different regions, we're using the same AMIs, but you get the idea. Okay. So thanks very much. That's the end of the session today, and we'll be back probably in a couple weeks in December, and we'll continue kind of learning about CloudFormation. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Get out there and build cool stuff.